So we have some breaking news that workers at Ford have sent a letter into the company saying that we want the company to stop producing police cars at least until there is significant police reform or some kind of clear and serious restriction to the departments that we sell our vehicles to. Now, unfortunately, right now, as of right now, the CEO Jim Hackett responded very quickly, saying that he doesn't think that it's controversial to sell to police departments. In his response here, he basically said here, quote, "It's not controversial that the Ford Police Interceptor helps police officers do their job. The issue plaguing police credibility has nothing to do with the vehicles that they're driving." Now, this statement is problematic, and I'm going to get to the next statement, which he has in just a second. But this statement here is problematic for at least two reasons. First of all, he's implying that police credibility, right? Like as if the issue of police violence is an issue of credibility, not an issue of what police officers are in fact doing, right? It's an issue of credibility. That's, problematic, but if that was the only thing in there, you might be able to say, okay, well, he said the wrong word, whatever. But then also he's going on to say that, basically Ford can't do anything about this. He's saying that, oh, well, the vehicles that they're driving are irrelevant. And, sort of prima facie, yeah, obviously, right? Like if police officers are driving into a crowd of peaceful protesters in a Ford vehicle, like does it matter if it's a Ford vehicle or if it's, a Kia, right? Like it doesn't actually really matter what kind of vehicle that police officers are using to charge into a crowd of peaceful protesters. What does matter, of course, though, is that Ford has significant leverage. So if you don't know, Ford currently makes up about 2/3 of the cop car market, right? So a significant share of the cop car market right now is dominated by Ford. And there's a reason for that, because Ford vehicles are very, they're sort of very customizable for police departments. They have a specific like police interceptor model right now, which is very popular among police departments. Police departments love it. And also there's a lot of customizability, which Ford offers to police departments, which a number of other car brands do not offer. So Ford actually does have significant leverage in this situation, right? Like, maybe Ford wouldn't be able to downright just say, look, we're not going to make any more police police sales for, such and such amount of time until, this or that happens, because probably then other companies would just take over the market and probably nothing could change. But what Ford could do is basically say, look, we're only going to sell to police departments that implement this reform, and that other reform. Now, you might hear that and think, well, that's not particularly sufficient. But I think we could all agree that it would be a step, and it does disprove Jim Hackett's claim that there's nothing that Ford could do. Now, let's go on to the next claim, which Jim Hackett makes. Hackett's memo continues saying, by taking away police interceptors, we would be doing harm to their safety, concerned more about the police officers, you can see, and making it harder for them to do their job. Again, this is why, given our insights, new capabilities, and leadership... Okay, just focus on this sentence here. Again, this is why, given our insights, new capabilities, and leadership, I believe these unfortunate circumstances present Ford with an even greater opportunity not only to innovate new solutions, but also leverage our unique position to support the dialogue and reform needed to create safer communities for all. So this is Buttigieg level BSing right here. Like, this is something I would expect to come out of the mouth of Pete Buttigieg. Like, this literally that sentence right there is the pinnacle example of a BS sentence that they taught you how to do while he's working on his MBA or whatever. I mean, that sentence literally means absolutely nothing. Like, oh, we're going to be supporting peaceful dialogue, and we're going to be, we're in a unique solution to innovate new solutions. Like, what does that mean? It means absolutely nothing. It means that he is going to do nothing. Nothing at all. He isn't going to take an opportunity to, use his leverage as CEO, or use the company leverage that, again, they do have over police departments to make reforms, as modest as those reforms might be, right? Like, obviously the government has much more ability to do significant reforms to policing. Duh. Obviously, but that doesn't mean that companies can't be involved. And in fact, in the case of Ford, given how much of the market that they make up, they actually could significantly force police reforms. Because, again, one of the major problems which we have to police reforms in this country is simply the fact that because police departments are so big and so powerful, oftentimes city councils will pass rules, pass regulations, and police departments just ignore them. And there's really not much that the sort of city council can actually do apart from calling in the governor to send in other people to force the change, right? Police departments are relatively autonomous in this country for most major cities because, again, they're just so big. They have so much power that they've outgrown the ability to have any kind of democratic check. They've outgrown the ability for us voters to have any kind of regulation or oversight. And it's part of the reason why reform has not been historically particularly effective for police, right? It's not that we haven't been trying. We have been trying for a long, long time. But police just continue to ignore any kind of regulations, any kind of restrictions that we have. You know, remember Eric Garner, chokehold, banned. What'd they do? Chokehold. In the case of George Floyd, that particular tactic, banned, but it was used anyway. We keep seeing these things, you know, recur and recur and recur, and police departments don't listen. But in the case of someone making production for a police department, they could force a change. They could force a change, even independent of maybe even, you know, sort of city council. Or, you know, at the very least, if city council has passed a rule and Ford is like, well, look, we're not going to sell you this vehicle unless you actually abide by the rules passed by your city council, which includes bans on chokeholds and other maybe more limited things which Ford might be able to ask for, then they would be like, well, okay, you know, look, you know, I'd rather have the Ford police, whatever, and so I guess I'll listen to my city council, right? Like, Ford can do things, and for Jim Hackett to run around saying, oh, I can't do anything, oh my gosh, you know, blah, 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 is just a bunch of BS. Again, Pete Buttigieg level BS here. Pete Buttigieg level BS. Now, the other thing here is obviously this pushes on a much deeper and much, much more important issue, which is the right for workers to determine their own production, right? This shows why it's so important for workers to be able to have control over their own production, because as companies are currently structured, they're basically little dictatorships, right? Because right now we're in a situation where workers could end up being forced by the CEO to produce things, to produce vehicles, to produce items for police in order to enable their own oppression at the threat of starvation, right? What happens if the worker decides, look, I'm not actually going to be producing vehicles for police anymore, especially for police departments which have terrible rates of violence towards minorities? Well, good luck. Ford, they'll just fire him and replace him with another worker at the threat of starvation. I mean, after all, look, to allude to Augustine here, right? Like, without justice, what are CEOs and landlords but petty tyrants and robber barons, right? Like, again, alluding to Augustine there. But it's really true. It's really true. We have to have serious control and democratic control over, you know, the means of production, over the things that are being produced. Workers have to have some kind of serious say. And right now, in our current system, workers have no say. Workers have no say. So these workers here, like, what are they going to do? At the end of the day, right, so they said, well, we want to see reform by July 15th. Right here, you can see July 15th. They're saying we want to hear reform by July 15th. What if Jim Hackett just says, nah, not going to do it? Well, there's really nothing that workers can do besides just leave. And at the end of the day, well, then they're just going to go hungry, right? Some of them might be able to find a job, but in these conditions, in the coronavirus, probably not many of them. So it is a situation where we've got to have serious workplace reform so that these kinds of things don't happen. We have to have a more democratic workplace. It's so important, right? It's so important, guys. So the other thing, though, that's really important when it comes to this here is that Ford right now is running around claiming that part of the reason, and one of the things that Jim Hackett specifically is saying is that actually we're already doing things in order to oppose the racial climate. And the thing that Jim Hackett pointed to here was that Ford Motor is pulling social media advertising as part of a Facebook boycott. So, as many of you guys know, a bunch of companies are pulling back advertising from Facebook, from Google, etc., until they, crack down on hate speech and ban them on their platforms, etc., etc. And that this is what Jim Hackett is saying that he's doing in order to contribute to the dialogue, the dialogue that he mentioned in his Pete Buttigieg quote there. I mean, guys, this is literally nothing, right? But when it comes to, oh, well, let's do something which might cost us a little bit of money, nope, can't do that. But pulling advertising dollars, pulling our spending in order to Facebook and Google for a couple months, sure, yeah, what the heck? We'll do that. We'll do that one. Guys, this is literally nothing. And by the way, the other thing I want to point out right now is that Google and Facebook have been cracking down oftentimes on left-wing sites too. So you may hear this and think to yourself, well, at least they're doing that. Guys, they're not just cracking down on white nationalists and right-wingers. They're also cracking down on left-wingers. The other day, there was a video about police brutality, and it was flagged saying that it had to be 18 years or older. 18 years or older. Now that's something that Google and YouTube are basically doing. They're listening through videos, using their sort of algorithm system sorting. And if they talk too much about police violence, police brutality, et cetera, it gets flagged and demobilized or deplatformed. Basically, it's less likely to get showed up and suggested, et cetera, et cetera. So if you talk about certain things, you basically get muted on YouTube nowadays, right? So it's not like, oh, well, this action by Ford Motors is just against right-wingers or white nationalists. Like, you can't sit here and be like, oh, well, at least they're doing something. No, this is literally probably counterproductive. I mean, look, yes, we want to crack down on white nationalists, obviously, but they're also turning around and using this as an excuse to crack down on left-wingers who they don't like to see on their platform. I mean, my gosh, guys, my gosh. I mean, Ford needs to do something, and obviously they need to listen to their workers, right? Democratic control is super, super important. But anyway, I just wanted to update you guys on that story. We'll have to see. July 15th, I'm not particularly optimistic, but we'll see what happens. All right, if you like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.